We lost 250% AoE, but we're okay. Hey folks, I know a lot of you have been expecting a massive Frostclaw nerf with 1.1, and they have delivered a nerf as expected. However, I have great news, and that's that Frostclaw seems to still be alive, and not only that, it is probably still S tier. So I've done a little bit of math over the last few hours since we got the patch notes, and done some theory crafting and a bit of reworking of my existing Frostclaw build. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do, please let me know by leaving a like on the video, as I will continue making the Frostclaw content that you guys crave. Anyway, so jumping over to the mana cost calculator. You've probably seen this before. I have updated it for 1.1. This is the new mana cost calculator. You can see this is the old one. The calculations are a little bit different. But yeah, so I've updated here to account for the changes to Frostclaw. You can see here it is. They did change the Gift of Winter, but they also reduced some of the costs around the board. So I factored all of that in, and you can see what the changes look like here. So this is 4 instead of 6, 4 instead of 6. These ones also changed, but I don't take them anymore because it's very, very difficult to afford Volley of Glass. But that's actually okay for Nova Frostclaw because most of our damage comes from Spark Charge, which we proc with Elemental Nova. So you probably, maybe you can take it. I don't know. Let's see. We're at -8 right now. How bad is it? Volley of Glass, Hand of Mortitas, -42, not going to happen. You need some sort of magic to make that work now. All right, so without those, you can see here we have the total casts. It is 5. However, for the sake of the mana recovery, I've updated the formula here. Instead of times number of casts, it's now just ×1. Gift of Winter only gives you one recovery on the direct. So you're going to be getting 4.3 mana recovered per cast instead of 21 point whatever it was before. This is a huge, huge difference. So you need to get your mana spent as low as possible. So here with this current setup, I managed to get the mana spent down to about 6 per cast. That means that you're at a deficit of about 2, not a big deal. So casting 250%-ish cast speed. This is ladle setup still. You're at about -8.1 per second. This is manageable. If you were using one of the new -5 staffs, you would be having a pretty good time, very easy. Or if you wanted to use Firestarter or something, get like -8. Actually, I don't even know if you can still get that on Scepters, but anyway, it's fine. Ladle is probably still best in slot, as far as I can tell, but that will be to be determined. Anyway, so this is a 22-point Frostclaw setup. I'll show you the planner. This is what it looks like in the skill tree. So you can see we have 22 points. That is with Enigma, giving you +1 for Lightning Frostclaw, no LP necessary, and Twisted Heart, giving you +1 for elemental skills, no LP necessary. So you don't need plus levels of Frostclaw on your Twisted Heart. Since you don't take Volley of Glass anymore, you don't need any of these points. It actually makes your life a lot easier, not needing a Twisted Heart with LP for the probably best in slot. Frostclaw is actually a huge deal. This makes a massive difference. So this is what the tree will look like in 1.1. You can see we pretty much have the same thing, minus Volley of Glass. We still get all the minus mana that we can. We still get Gift of Winter. It's still worth it. We still get Nova. We grab 4 points of Celerity. Ideally, you're probably going to also want the idols that give the Frostclaw mana efficiency. And then for our Nova tree, the other big nerf that we saw, we'll see. Wait, hold on. Let me pull that up. Elemental Nova. Infernal Nova's area increase now only applies to direct casts. Okay, so what's important about that is it was being used to give us 250% AoE. So instead of these 6 points that we used to take to path to this node, we save those, and instead we dump them into AoE. So here you have 100% AoE, here you have 40%. So we recover a pretty big chunk of what we lost here. And I'll show you in game what it actually looks like, and you'll be surprised to see it's actually fine. So here I have the passives that I showed you. This is still 1.0 patch, but I am using the spec that we will be running in 1.1, so I have no Infernal Nova here. I also have no volley of glass here. I have 4 points. Everything is exactly the same as I just showed you. You can see I have 2 extra points here. That's because I have LP on my Twisted Heart, but you'll see that that's not actually necessary because I'm not using those 2 points. So anyway, this is what the AoE looks like now. This is what it will look like in 1.1. And it's still extremely substantial. This is a massive AoE. And if that's not enough for you, you can actually get AoE on these idols. So back to the planner real quick. So here you can see on the 3x1 idols, you can get increased area elemental Nova. So this will make your Nova bigger. If you want, you can run this for even more AoE. There's also AoE in the passives. You could get it on the big one, but it's a prefix, so you wouldn't get the efficiency. If you don't have mana problems, you could run that if you want. Probably not necessary. But anyway, as you can see, the AoE is still totally fine. The mana is still totally fine. -8 per second is completely manageable, and if you have lower cast speed, which you probably will until endgame, it's even less. So your regen's probably going to be like 14 per second or something like that, completely manageable. So I'm still taking the Flame Rush. We're still doing Cold Fire Cold for Runic, even though it is nerfed. Nothing has changed here. Snap Freeze, nothing has really changed here. This is only 4 nodes, it used to be 5. I think Stunlock is probably not possible anymore, but we'll have to test it out and see. My guess is no, but it's a little bit unclear. We also have the Runic. The problem here is Arcane Battery. It used to be per 10 mana spent. I guess it still is, but now we don't really spend much mana because of the Frostlaw changes. So we can't really stack up as much Runics, and Frostguard is also nerfed. We don't get 30% DR for free anymore. However, we do gain significantly more ward per int on the Runic, so we're going to gain about 700 flat. It's 2 ward per int plus, I believe it's 100 on the initial cast of Runic. So that's 700 flat at 200 int. And then it's an additional, what was it? I think it was it was 1 ward per int per 0.4 seconds. So that's another like 500 or something ward per second while it's running. So you're going to get like significant amount, like several thousand ward from Runic still. So I think even though Frostguard is nerfed, it's still worth it. You lose a lot of DR. Maybe we'll find another way to get more DR throughout 1.1 and Contingent Theorcraft. So back to the planner. The gear that I'm using here, this is the endgame setup. It's basically exactly the same gear as I had before. The main difference is instead of using the Strands of Souls, I'm now just using an Exalted Belt. So that will make getting affixes a lot easier, and it's another item you don't need to farm. But Strands of Souls gives you mana spent gained as ward. And the issue with that is since our Frostclaw is only 6 mana, you're only spending something like 30 mana per second. So it's not a big deal to get mana spent gained as ward. It's probably not worth it anymore. So don't even worry about mana spent gained as ward. Prioritize other stuff. So anyway, here we have the Exalted Belt. Core of the Mountain, still the same. This is probably the best. I don't know. Feel free to experiment. Prismatic Gaze, still probably the best. Ladle, I think, is still probably the best. There might be some new stuff you can do. I don't know. We'll see. Enigma, somehow this survived the nerf. I'm kind of surprised, but anyway, probably still the best. Actually, it's mandatory. Red Ring, still best in slot. There are alternatives in the... most of these items in the cheat sheet that I provided before are probably still going to be the same. I don't think anything has changed here, except anything that gives you mana spent gained as ward is no longer priority, but otherwise everything is the same. The Twisted Heart, still the same. I don't think that we're going to be pushing as much corruption in this league unless you really want to, but there's a lot less incentive because the favor gained is extremely diminished. So your priority is going to be to try and farm things as quickly as you can rather than trying to farm as much corruption as you can. So maybe push up to like 6, 7, 800 and then just speed farm. And this is what you're going to want for your speed farm. And that being said, I didn't prioritize getting an experimental affix. I don't think it really matters anymore. I don't think Orion's Eye is necessary at all because damage over time is mostly like a high corruption thing. If you're not high corruption, it doesn't matter as much, so you can run an Exalted Amulet or an Ominous or whatever you want. This is not necessary. The red rings you could replace with Fairbor's Set Ring or an Exalted or Opal Ring if you want more cooldown reduction. Blood of the Exile still best in slot. Strength is armor, int is damage, dex is dodge. Everything here is good. Gives you speed. I think it might even be worth running T7 move speed on the Blood of the Exile, mainly because damage is probably going to be less important going into cycle 2. If we're farming lower corruption, speed is probably the name of the game. So anyway, this is what I have so far for my gear. The idols are mostly the same. You can get some dodge and finish capping out your resists here. If you don't have red rings, you're probably going to need more resists in your idols or your other gear pieces, or maybe some in the passives or something like that. There will be ways to get more resist if you need it, or blessings. Otherwise, for blessings, exactly the same. Crit multi, all res, armor, and shred. Another thing that's slightly different is I'm running reduced bonus damage taken from crits, 2 affixes. You're probably going to need a little bit more now because they did nerf the node in Runemaster. So on that note, we'll move over to passives. In the base tree, still very much the same. We have int, we have reactive ward, we have the crit, we have the cooldown. I guess cooldown we don't really care. It sort of helps for Saffreys a bit. And you have cast speed. Cast speed's still #1 priority. Then for Sorc, this is pretty much the same as before. There's some other stuff you might be able to do, but I didn't really think anything was that great. And then we have the Runemaster tree. This is where the most changes are. There's some AoE here if you want it, but they heavily nerfed the ward gained per rune on area skill use. This is 6 ward per direct cast. That's like 30 ward per second or something. This is basically terrible. Grab it if you want, I guess. This is nerfed, but it's still worth taking. It's a lot of crit multi. This is also nerfed. It used to be 48, and now it's 36, so you need a little bit more. In my gear, I only go up to 96% reduction, but that's probably fine. You can go a bit higher if you want. I don't really think it's that big of a deal. We still grab DR because it's important. We grab this because cast speed is everything. We still grab the int here. This node is also nerfed. It used to be 1 per 4, now it's 1 per 6. So we're going to lose a little bit of our CDR. That's really not that big of a deal either. This is also nerfed. We gain ward on crit. I didn't even realize this has a cap now. So this is 50 ward per second max. Probably not worth 5 of 5. We'll find another place for this node here. It can go anywhere. But anyway, there you go, 4 to 5 here. You get your crit multi. That's really important. Spellblade, it now has this new int node here, ward decay threshold per int, so you're going to get about 150 to 200 endgame bit of ward threshold. This is not bad. It's basically a little bit of buffer. You gain, when you use an elemental melee attack, you don't do that with this build, but you do gain flat int, which is good. So I think this is worth taking. There's also int here if you really want to path. Also early game, when you don't have much int on your gear, this node is probably worth taking. So consider this until you have a lot of int on your gear. Then it's some diminishing returns on that. In the next videos, I'm hopefully looking to revisit some of the other builds. So for example, we have a lot of Spellblade stuff. I think potentially there might be some really interesting stuff here. We have flat crit per int. This means it'll be extremely easy to crit cap for a Spellblade, potential Mana Strike, Frostclaw build. We also have Frostclaw chance on hit in addition to what's in the tree. You have 30%. This now gives you 50% per melee to cast Frostclaw. Very interesting Mana Strike potential here that you could end up building. I'm not sure exactly how good it will be, but you had a pretty huge buff to Spellblade, so I'm probably going to try and revisit the Mana Strike build and maybe theorycraft something at some point in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, there is a potential for a Sorcerer Frostclaw. I think that there's some really interesting synergy that can be done with the Spark Charge here. If you're going for a one-shot build, you could have a max mana cost Frostclaw and get above 40 mana. And then you take this node here, you grab the Volley of Glass and all the bounces and everything, and I'm hoping that every hit counts towards applying Spark Charge. You get potentially 20 to 30 hits per cast of Frostclaw. You apply 20 to 30 Spark Charges, and then with int stacking and Enigma, you're looking at potentially 10,000 flat damage before multipliers for a single Frostclaw cast. So I do think that there is a potential one-shot Frostclaw build that might pop up in 1.1. I'm pretty excited to see if that ends up being a thing, and if so, you'll have a possible Frostclaw build for every mage class. We lost 250% AoE, but we're okay.